So then, we are back with more understandings from the time of the Second Tabernacle services, where we find in the Aramaic English translation of the word. This translation comes from the original manuscripts of the prophets of the Israelic lineage. So then we can understand the time of the end as per Shaul the prophet. We find layers of understanding of the spring feast, the autumn feast, and also the returning of the cities of the Messiah laid waste for many centuries. As we read this prophecy precisely on Shaul the 61st chapter, you find then the Messiah himself during his time of duty. He then was reading from the holy instruction regarding this prophecy of Shaul. Regarding the spring feast, he came and he completed half of the instructions, half of the prophets. Then there is the second portion known as the autumn feast, found also in Leviticus the 23rd chapter, and that's why then the Messiah did not read the second portion of the 61st chapter. But let's then understand what's going on in the world, so then we can evaluate the nations and can evaluate the systems. And then reading from Daniel. Daniel the prophet was a prophet mostly on behalf of the Gentiles. The Creator then is always the first. He is then very knowledgeable. He created the heavens and the earth, and he knows every aspect of human beings. Not only this, but he then decided to give this information, so then Daniel was recording these for us. It states then, 12th chapter and the 2nd verse, then explains that some of them are going to be resting and then shalt awake, explaining then what Shaul obviously explained in the 65th and 66th chapter, explaining then post-autumn feast. Not only this, but we find then some of them with everlasting life, and some of them obviously will burn when the second death is then executed, regarding the shout of sulfur, known as the second death. But then explains also, and then knowledge shalt increase. Where do we find these? We find in the 5th verse. Many then shalt roam. Roam, R-O-A-M, explains then his people. Explains during the time of the 1,000 years of deceit. 1,000 years with no holy cities. This is what it means, and your people then shalt roam for a time, and then knowledge shalt increase. It's not incredible. Then during the time of the end of the 1,000 years of deceit, ended in 09, the amount of knowledge gathered during this time of the 1,000 years of deceit, absolutely incredible. But it was then the most important topic regarding the information of knowledge of trade. Daniel was mostly a person that was involved with trading for the kingdom. He worked under many kings. Darius was one of them. Then you find the king of Babylon was another. And each of them, as you can observe very intently, each of those kings, do you understand that Daniel never changed his ministry? He was then a person with a solid vocation for trading. He was then the trader of every kingdom. He was involved with the finances of each of those kings, and each new king never wanted to change any aspect of his work. So then, coming from Daniel, very solid politician, what can we observe and understand as far as knowledge shalt increase? Let me ask you this. Are we explaining the increasing of knowledge of the holy instructions? No, because the prophets, they already gave the information. During the time of Daniel, he had manuscripts of Yirmiyahu. He was obviously knowledgeable of Yeshayahu and many other prophets of his time. However, Daniel was in captivity. It was during the 70 years of captivity because Israel did not maintain the yearly Shabbat. So during the time of the 490 years they owned the land, 70 was taken aside, so then the holy instruction regarding then the resting of the land would be completed. And it was, liking it or not. Then Ezekiel and Daniel were then contemporaries. During the time of the captivity, both of these prophets, they were in distinct places. They were not together. They were in distinct places, meaning Daniel was in one place, Ezekiel was in another place. Yet they knew each other in his spirit, because you find the content of Daniel and Ezekiel very similar. So then, as we understand this aspect, what can we then observe as far as and the nations will try to adhere to each other, but they would not? What can we understand as Daniel explaining this kind of system? Daniel the prophet, firstly, understandably, he was a politician. He was a tradesperson. He did understand many kinds of systems. He did understand also that each of those nations he was involved with, doing trade with other kingdoms, each of them, they had their specific monetary system. He was a person of systems. When we read then these nations regarding trade, and then we understand knowledge shall increase for the purposes of trade, and then he explaining then the nations will try to adhere to each other, but they would not. He is explaining of a system created of their very own. Obviously we are explaining these because after the 1,000 years of deceit, when we read, and your people shout Rome, R-O-A-M, Rome, when your people then shout Rome for a time, then knowledge shall increase. Then there is a place of this system where then they are working together, but they won't adhere to each other. Thus then we understand the base of the statue, some of the iron, some of the clay, are then both of them mixed, making the basis of the statue. These then we read, and the nations shall not adhere to each other under a system. And it's absolutely true. Yesterday came information via news regarding then the European Union absolutely stagnated, simply has halted. The European Union, they are not growing, and their system is truly failing. Daniel explained it centuries ago, and then it is true. We should be very satisfied, even more, in reading the holy instructions, because the more we read, the more we get solid, and the more we can understand the holy works of the Creator himself. But then let's understand a situation regarding this system. Obviously, Daniel was part of a system. Daniel was obviously familiar with tabernacling. He did receive understandings of tabernacling during his secular work on behalf of pagan kings. So then, explaining this section regarding many nations coming together under a system and not adhering to each other, other side of the situation, or the contrary of these, you find then there is a true system where they should be under. And this system is the system of Daniel. So then, that's when we get a link with Shaliach Shaul. Shaliach Shaul was then a person very acquainted with the holy instructions, very acquainted with Daniel and Ezekiel, Yirmiyahu, Yeshayahu, Amos, and many other prophets, and he was absolutely expert in the Holy Torah, and he worked under Gamaliel. And back then was not easy for a student then to become a learner from Gamaliel. But not only this, we find then during this time of ours there is a system where we can understand as far as the Creator himself in his own system, the system of the kingdom. Daniel was practicing what he learned as far as how trade should perform. Shaliach Shaul explained how trade should perform. Why, for instance, then Asia is so popular and so prosperous? Because Shaliach Shaul, during the time of the Messiah and when he came, he did receive understandings and completions of the spring feast. As he was teaching the people, he was also teaching them ethics of how to behave themselves when they are trading on behalf of the kingdom. It was the system of the kingdom to come. When we read Yeshayahu the prophet, 65th and 66th chapter, we find then those people coming from their resting places. Obviously, we are people of the earth. And in the new earth, that's where we shall be. We are going to plant, we are going to gather, we are going to harvest, we are going to build homes. We were made for the earth. Some people, they have the wrong idea that when they go to heaven, they are going to become in a spirit-like body or some sort of it. No. As we understand, we were created, our senses, soul, body, spirit, related for this earth. We were made for this. We do not belong in the world of the spirit. Though we understand the spirit when we read the instructions, we were made for the earth. So then, explaining then a system, Shaliach Shaul was explaining then the kingdom to come and the system thereof. You have to be responsible. You have to be kind. You have to help other people. You have to get your pocket open and then helping somebody else. You have to include others when there are gains. Those teachings of the kingdom to come were explained during the time of Daniel and during the time of Shaliach Shaul. Now let me ask you this. How many nations in this planet do this kind of exercise? Not very many nations, do they? Then we understand why those countries under the same system of their own, it's not working. Because they don't do what Daniel and Shaliach Shaul taught. Are they kind? No. Are they truthful? No. They are scoundrels. Do they act in a way of bringing others into the plan? No, they do the contrary. So the whole system is based upon thieving, lying, and cheating. And do you think the Creator likes this? No, He does not. That's why the system does not work, and the European Union is stagnated, so as the United States and any other country involved with any kind of a system except China. They are involved in many kinds of situations where they are not growing. As we understand then the new system, the BRICS, coming from China, the Kingdom of the East, then we understand how this new system is going to be via computer. Why then this system should be via computer? Because each individual, each person can exercise what the instructions then taught. You don't have to have a system of this world to take you by the hand. No, you read the instructions and you do what it states, and you exercise those traits that Daniel and Shaliach Shaul taught, so each person can become prosperous. The word prosperous, however, we should always strive for the understanding of the Torah, the instructions, and the prophets. Thus we understand bearing fruit. The Messiah said, what is then for a person to gain the entire world, and then at the end, then the soul is lost? Do we want to be traders of this world and having provisions and be prosperous and then forget about the Torah and the instructions and not bear fruit? No, because at the end the person is going to get burned. We want primarily being very acquainted with the instructions, and the byproduct of it then comes prosperity in a level where then the Creator uses the person for. So at the end, the person bears fruit, and then the soul is saved. Because the salvation of the soul is conditional. As we bear fruit, the Creator prunes, so a person bears even more fruit. If a person does not bear fruit, then is thrown away with the others and burned with the others. Are we going to be prosperous for this world system? No, because it's going to get burned. And we do not want to get burned with it, do we? So then, the new system, coming very fastly. The BRICS Bank is nearly ready for start lending, so each person then can get the money. There are many thousands of sites where you can get virtual monetary systems. You don't have to be linked up with any kind of a central bank anymore. You can get products, you can send money, you can receive under this new system. So then, how is the new system going to be like? Very similar to the ones that are already available. The only situation is the amount of wealth via the computer is so big that each person can consider himself or herself already a banker, a trader, a person regarding then freighters and sending packages and receiving packages and so on and so forth. And you can exercise the trades that Daniel taught in Shaliach Shaul, or they can be scoundrels. But then the chance is given for every person. That's why the system then is via computer. Knowledge shall increase for the purposes of trade. Why then computer? Because computer is precise. If you have a negative balance with the computer, simply the computer can't function. You have to be responsible one way or the other. Maintain the balance always up. For these you have to have knowledge. For these you have to have trustable people working for you. Thus providing then a system very healthy, so then people can get jobs and can work. What can we understand as far as bearing fruit? Should a person only be a nice trader, having a nice family, a nice home, and so on and so forth? Is this truly what then Daniel was explaining of high knowledge? He was explaining regarding the Gentiles, wasn't he? But should we stop with Daniel and then this layer of understanding on behalf of Gentiles, or should we read what the Savior said regarding the soul? We should do what Daniel said. However, we should be concerned with bearing fruit. Yohanan explains what the Messiah said. Bearing fruit, understanding tabernacling, understanding the Torah, understanding then the times and the seasons, reading Hebrews, for instance, the first tabernacle service, second tabernacle services, and then explaining the times and the seasons for other people so they can be linked up with Leviticus and understand the world has only 10 plus 8 years left only. And then comes the autumn feast, in explaining what is the purpose of tabernacling, what should be people doing. Are we then the testifiers on behalf of the Messiah, or we are part of the holy cities? And explains those areas. If we don't do these, then we do not bear fruit. And the Messiah simply saying, what is for you then to gain the whole world? Not only have some money and some property, you can gain the whole world. And at the end, then you get burned with the rest of them. However, if we are wise, then we understand. We do what Shaliach Shaul has mentioned, and we do what Daniel was explaining. A system of the kingdom to come system. That's why it was so prosperous. However, we do not want prosperity only. We want bear fruit. So then, these were great news. We understand the European Union is already stagnated. The Western nations are also stagnated. And the whole world is preparing for the new computerized system coming via online. And should be shortly. It was already then confirmed from 12 to 24 months. The BRICS Bank will be ready for lending. And until then, we find ourselves then having thousands of stores receiving optional monetary systems that do not have any link with central banks. It's already given you a hint of what's coming. So then, with this in mind, next time we're going to read more of Yirmiyahu, because then we're going to introduce what this freighting means, or freighters. In the 23rd chapter of Yirmiyahu we find then the traders, and you can link up then with the Revelation. And at the same time, Daniel, and then Shaliach Shaul. And then mostly related with the sons of Ishmael, because Ishmael obviously was a king, and during the time of Joseph, when he was sold into slavery in Egypt, he was sold into the caravans of the Ishmaelites, and they were already active in the land. So then we can understand what it means, freighters and then the Ishmaelites. And then we link up with the later in the 62nd chapter of Yirmiyahu, plus the 37th chapter of Ezekiel, the stick of authority of the first son. So please stay tuned, much more coming up.